What was the dumbest rule your parents had growing up? Story 1. I am the oldest of 3 brothers. Anytime I would graduate to getting allowed to do something because they deemed me old enough to, my younger brothers would get the same permission at the same time. This wasn't a rule per se, just something that happened a lot. For instance, later bedtime, being able to watch PG-13 movies, being able to watch your movies, being able to stay out late with friends. This may seem trivial, but I ended up having a much more sheltered life than either of my brothers. Story 2. My dad had all the fun rules. Must ask to use the restroom, must ask to take a shower, must ask to go to bed, must ask to get a glass of water or milk, must ask for a glass for that water or milk, must ask permission for food of any kind, no closing the door unless you're changing your clothes. When playing in the front yard, must stay where you can be seen from the windows. Background info for this: one parents divorced, dad remarried, stepmom came in tow with my 2 stepbrothers, one older and one younger, and an older stepsister. He thought I was a bad influence and was trying to seduce my step-siblings. Even when I was like 8, not allowed to play in the same room as step-siblings unless it was the living room, which we weren't allowed to have certain toys in the living room anyway. Legos are a lot less fun if you have to play alone and kick everyone else out of the room. Just saying, every morning when you wake up, you must get completely dressed as if you were about to leave the house, including shoes, even if we weren't going anywhere, every morning, after getting dressed and making your bed in my case. Air mattress, since I slept on the floor of the nursery most of the time. You had to do solo Bible study where you would alternate days between reading Old and New Testament. Then you had to write a 1-page essay about that chapter. After that, we all assembled at the table to go over what everyone read, then read a chapter together as a family and discuss it. Only after completing that were you allowed to have breakfast, but if it was after 9 or 10 a.m., it was considered too late for breakfast and you weren't allowed to eat. This did happen regularly. If you asked to go outside and play or asked to play video games, you must invite my dad to play. If you don't, you would get lectured for hours. It was required that if I didn't go to work with my dad, then I had to stay awake and sit at the dinner table until he returned home. Sometimes it would be well past midnight and even times past 2 a.m. It was required because he wanted to see me and spend time with me, and he required a hug and kiss goodnight. If I chose to go to bed even with permission from my stepmom, he would drag me out of bed by the arm and make me go watch him eat. You must always say yes, sir, with the right tone. Severe consequences if you failed to do so. No phone calls and no mail allowed for kids. This was hard for me as visitation required me to spend the entire month of June with him, and he was located in another state. I was to have no contact with family or friends while with him. I'm sure there are others, but it's been a decade since I last saw him, so my memory is a bit fuzzy. Edit: to add another story, my stepmom took me and all of my step-siblings to a friend's house to hang out for a while, play cards and some video games. My dad typically didn't go with us, but for some reason met up with us this time. Me, my 2 stepbrothers and their friend were playing Zelda on N64. I guess there was a part where there was a song played for Goddess of Time. My dad got upset about it. He ended up demanding that the family friend get rid of the game or the friendship would need to come to an end. They weren't happy about it, but they either got rid of the game or at least said they did and hid it when we came over. Story 3. It always drove me crazy that I was the favored child just because I was only one born without a penis. Every Christmas I'd get the really cool boxes while my older brothers got socks. I started asking Santa for Legos and Bionicles, then letting my older brothers play with my toys instead. Even now my mom still treats my older brothers like they are garbage, and it drives me crazy. They are your kids too, man. Story 4. I wasn't allowed to own a calendar. That meant I might plan something against my parents or something for graduation. My best friend got me one of those calendars with buff dudes on it, and I displayed it proudly in my room all summer until college, plotting my revenge against my parents every single day. Story 5. My parents refused to let me read or watch Harry Potter because it was demonic or something. Same applies to Pokemon, DBZ, etc. I grew up in the 90s, for God's sake. The first time I ever watched a Harry Potter movie was in 2012. First time I read one of the books was 2014. I've now done the whole book series 4 times. Good job, Mom and Dad. Story 6. No access to the internet. My parents are both computer scientists. Luckily I knew the Wi-Fi password because my dad wrote it down. Mom was furious when she found out, but then in a few years let my younger brother have a computer in his bedroom. Story 7. If you were to visit my childhood home, you'd walk through the front door to find the kitchen on your right, the living room straight ahead, and a carpeted hallway just beyond that. If you were to then follow that carpeted hallway, you'd pass the family room, my father's office, the laundry room, and the bedroom shared by my brother and me, with my parents' room seeming to complete the tour. There would be another door in that hallway though, a closed door, a forbidden door. My parents were somewhat strict while I was growing up, mostly out of necessity, given that I was an incredibly troublesome child, but almost all of their various rules made sense. Even back then, I could see the merits in not playing with knives, for example. The only exception had to do with that aforementioned door, which I had been expressly barred from even approaching, let alone actually opening. Friends who visited me would occasionally ask what was on the other side, and I'd make up wild tales of prisoners, long-lost relatives, and even magical portals to distant lands. But the truth of the matter was that I didn't know now. Sure, I had vague suspicions about what that off-limits room contained, and I'd even managed to catch a few glimpses from time to time, but it wasn't until one afternoon when I was about 5 years old that I finally discovered the terrible secret. On that fateful day, I hatched what I thought was a truly diabolical plan. I waited for my mother to distract herself with some chore or another, sent my younger brother off to play hide and seek with himself, then tripped outside the forbidden door and caught myself on its handle. Having thus accidentally opened the door, I peered inside. I couldn't believe what I saw. That evening at dinner, I recounted my adventure to my parents. "Did you know," I said to them, trying to keep my tone casual, "that there's an empty bedroom in this house?" My father glanced over at my mother with a barely concealed grin. "Really?" he asked. "Where's that?" "It's behind the," I said, catching myself too late. "It's behind the off-limits door." "Did you open the off-limits door?" My father gasped. "Yes, even though we told you not to." I folded my arms in the way that I'd see my mother do it. "Well, you never told me why it was off-limits." My father pretended to consider this. "You know what this means, don't you?" "And no," I answered, suddenly feeling very nervous. "This means you can have a room of your very own if you want." At the time, I mistakenly assumed that because ID discovered the empty bedroom, I was therefore allowed to occupy it. It took far longer than it should have, until I was practically an adolescent, in fact, for me to realize the truth of the matter. And by that point, my parents had probably started wishing that they'd never encouraged me to rebel. TLDR, there was a forbidden door in my childhood home, and one day, I opened it. Story 8. I had a bedtime until I was 18, not a curfew, a bedtime. It was 930. When I came home for holidays in college, I still had a bedtime. It was still 930. Story 9. Not the most ridiculous thing maybe, but I had no say in how my room was decorated. I understand rules like don't be filthy and avoid punching holes in the wall, but I wasn't allowed to have posters, or figurines. Or any kind of art really. Couldn't pick my own bedding even if it was cheaper than what they had in mind. Certainly wasn't allowed to provide input on what color the walls should be painted, etc. I understand wanting to preserve resale value, but the house didn't even go to market until I was well into my college studies. Felt like I was living in a model home. Story 10. My mother would never let me watch The Simpsons because it's pure garbage. She's never seen an episode, and doesn't understand this. It's more wholesome than most shows out there. Story 11. My dad was not allowed to have a balloon, so he had 8 siblings, and one of them stole a balloon and they hid it deep in a closet and would go and just stare at it. Growing up, my dad would buy balloons like it was an obsession. Learning the truth explained much. No, my grandpa was a doctor, and I guess a bunch of kids in the 50s choked to death on balloons, so he outlawed them. Story 12. Oh gosh, I wasn't allowed to watch Power Rangers, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Harry Potter, Are You Afraid of the Dark, most Disney Nickelodeon shows, and definitely no movies with the PG-13 or R rating. Occasionally even a PG movie was out of the question. I wasn't allowed to go stay the night at a girlfriend's house, but they could stay the night with me, but we weren't allowed to sleep in the same bed together. I'm talking like 8 years old to 18 years old. I was definitely not allowed to listen to anything but Christian music, Jeremy Camp, Chris Tomlin, Hillsong, Michael W. Smith, DC Talk, etc. My mom found out I was listening to the band Paramore when I was 16 and grounded me to an Amish lifestyle for 12 months. No internet, no phone, no hanging out with friends, nothing at all. It didn't help that I was homeschooled half of my life either. Thank God I left when I was 18. I'm never going back either. Story 13. My parents always used to hang out in the garage. It was deemed the adult hangout zone. If I needed to speak with them, then I had to knock on the door and wait for them to give me permission to enter. I later found out when I got older that they were smoking bud and ripped out of their mind most of the time. Story 14. Maybe not so much of a rule, but just something that at the time confused me. We lived way out in the bush, so in the weekends when I went out drinking there was really no way to get home. I've slept on people's couches, in basements, in the back of my car, in empty hallways. I've even slept in a newspaper recycling container. Not a word from my parents on where I was or how I spent the night. I disappeared Friday night and usually didn't come home until Sunday afternoon. I got a girlfriend and I start hanging out with her, and a Wednesday night I decide to sleep over. The next day my mom's is going apes hit over how I had not told her where I was and they had been worried sick. I'm gone 48h during the weekend. No probs. 12h on a Wednesday night. I've probably been murdered. Story 15. The only craziest thing I could remember was that some things were the devil. Halloween was the devil. Pokemon was the devil. Rock music was the devil. Then my mom bought us Pokemon card. Watched Gantz and Elfenlied all by herself after catching me watching it. Still couldn't break her into rock music. But she was like, at least they don't scream all the time. Story 16. My mom always said when I was going to a party that if I can snort it or smoke it I could take it. Any tablet was a no-no. Pretty sure she was okay with me smoking heroin but not taking a ibuprofen. Story 17. Growing up it wasn't the rule, it was the punishment. Go to your room. You mean the room where all my books and comics are, that I spend a lot of time in already? Sure thing, on my way. Story 18. In the car, my brother will always sit at the back right and I have to sit at the back left. We're not allowed to swap seats. We used to fight over who gets to sit where. Once my brother made me sit on the sunny side but promised we would swap on the way back. Guess what? On the way back we were going in the opposite direction, so I was still on the sunny side. That was the day the rule was born. We're both in our 20s now and still uphold this rule. Story 19. We only had one real rule in our house. Don't make mom angry. And if she looked aggravated, I made myself scarce. That usually meant going outside or feel the wrath of Genghis mom. Story 20. Share your food even if the person says no. Basically, if I offer you food and you refuse, Save some for you because you might change your mind. Now this sucks when I buy it with my own money and you denied me when I asked if you want some. I still can't believe all the hours I stood because we have to stand when getting chewed out because of that stupid rule. It's your fault even if you didn't do it. My little brother broke a vase when he was younger. Now I am in the shower after being outside from cutting grass. I walk out, refreshed and ready to play some video games, to see my granted legal guardian waiting with his 4 belts to whoop my. First I get chewed out then beat. Another time is when my brother broke a VCR because he thought he could carry it, little dropped it and broke. This time I got my hooped with a switch I know in the South. Those long sticks you take off a tree because I was supposed to carry it. I was carrying both bags of charcoal. I couldn't do is race a factor with punishment because my white friends apparently got it easy. Story 21. According to my father, the butter in the container had to be smooth when I was done using it. I was not allowed to use a serrated knife, or take chunks out of it. He said he liked to have nice looking butter, so naturally teenage rebel me would carve a big smiley face in it. Also according to my father, the volume on the TV was never allowed to be above the number 18. Story 22. I was the oldest. I was forced to babysit 3 younger siblings every Sunday night. I was not allowed to punish them in any way if they didn't listen to me. They wouldn't listen. I have no authority. I am the babysitter. What is the correct way to handle this problem before it happens? It doesn't. What is the correct way to handle this problem after it happened? Call mom. Don't call mom while she's out. In the babysitter, my only way of having them actually listening to me was with the threat of calling mom when they disobeyed. However, my mom would not pick up the phone and in calling her, I only proved that I was a bad babysitter. So what would I do? Let those kids do whatever they wanted. Since I had no way to get them to do anything, mom comes home. Guess who is still a shitty babysitter and now gets grounded? I was so miserable during those times. Story 23. Having to use the word blessed instead of the word lucky, and not being allowed to say that your head was killing you in case your head literally killed you. Story 24. I couldn't spend the night anywhere on Saturday nights or have anyone stay on Saturday nights because my parents insisted that we go to but crack early church on Sunday mornings where my dad would immediately fall asleep and doze through the service. They were so against going to a later mass because you just waste half the day. This, despite the fact that every Sunday my dad would get home and fall asleep in his chair for 1 to 2 hours. Bizarrely, there was an exception to this rule. I was allowed to not go to church if I was working at that time. So yeah, if I had to wake up early, I figured I may as well be making money for it. I've been out of their house for almost 20 years and I still think it was by far the dumbest they could do. Story 25. Not me, but my friend's parents. His parents were super strict type. In bed at 9:00 p.m. He only had a bed and a dresser in his room, was limited to television only 30 minutes a day, and they didn't even have cable. It was movies or nothing. Laptop was only for homework. I remember he once asked for Fruit Loops, and was sent to his room, because they had sugar in them. Yeah, I felt bad for him, as I was the spoiled neighbor boy. Story 26. My parents are both massive Steven Seagal fans, and every morning when I woke up I had to go downstairs and recite a couple of lines from his film Under Siege, or they wouldn't let me play video games. Story 27. I could do one fun thing per weekend, no more. If I stayed at a friend's house on Friday, I couldn't do anything with friends on Saturday or Sunday because I was doing too much. It really warped my perception of plans and acceptable timing of visits. Story 28. Not one particular rule but just the inconsistency of the rules. One day something would be fine, the next day it wouldn't be, then it would be okay again. Stupid stuff like getting a snack without asking permission or drinking a soda from the fridge. We generally did not have many rules, but every once in a while my mom would go on a tirade and randomly try to enforce very strict rules like going to bed at 8:30, which of course was met with resistance because it would just be out of the blue when we were used to staying up and watching TV until late at night. These rules would last for about 3 days and then just disappear. Oh, and not being allowed to watch generic sitcoms when I was 10 and we only had 4 channels, basic ones. So most of the evening was nothing but sitcoms. I already knew about way more than I was going to learn from hearing a few innuendos or mild swear words. Story 29. My curfew was an hour earlier than my brother's. My dad's logic: with Jeff I have to worry about one penis. With you I have to worry about all of them. Story 30. If you get rained on, you must take a shower, otherwise you'll get sick. This was an actual rule in our household. I think it's the Filipino in my mom. Story 31. I wasn't allowed to brush my own teeth until I was 10, but my mom was too lazy to come to the bathroom and brush my teeth, so I had to get my toothbrush ready and go find her wherever she was in the house to brush my teeth. Then she would hold my face in a vice grip and furiously scrub my teeth, with the toothbrush slipping and painfully jabbing the inside of my mouth constantly. But the absolute worst part is I'm standing in the living room, there's nowhere to spit, so I had to swallow all the toothpaste foamy spit. Thanks mom. It turns out toothpaste is pretty toxic and you're not supposed to swallow it, but I did have really clean teeth though, I guess. Story 32. I had 2 rules that relate to each other. As a teen, my dad said if I managed to get into college, I could only apply to schools in Massachusetts where we lived. I wanted to go to Ithaca. As much as people think you have autonomy at 18, you really don't. I was not prepared to give up my dad's health insurance, and while he didn't help me out that much financially for school, I'm still paying loans 5 years after graduation. I needed his help, so I went to college in Massachusetts. My dad's other stupid rule was his reluctance to let me study abroad. I begged him for 6 years to let me go since he had gotten to study abroad at 18, But he kept saying it was too dangerous and that it was quitting school and I needed to finish what I started. Study abroad was replacing the fall semester of my senior year of college. Not the entire thing. Ironic coming from a divorced guy. I wanted to go to Australia, but my dad wouldn't budge. It's a first world country. They speak English. I don't speak a foreign language fluently, and I had relatives there. During my junior year, my best friend in college who had studied abroad in Spain had said how great her program was. That night my dad emailed me to send him info about studying abroad. He said if I had my heart set on going abroad, London was the only place he approved since he had been there before. I had relatives there and it was a non-stop flight from Boston. I sent him the information and he was like, wow, why didn't you tell me how great this was? Facepalm. My younger sister, meanwhile, was allowed to apply to college wherever she wanted, studied abroad in London with no questions asked and were able to intern in DC for a semester. The older child is always the practice one, unfortunately. Story 33. We had a behavior bear. It was like a piggy bank except it was a bear, and I had to put a quarter in it if I had bad behavior. Sounds fine so far, right? The thing is, I was about 7, my allowance was $1 a week, and any display of unhappiness was considered being negative, which was bad behavior. Mom, how are you? Me not happy. Mom complaining. That's a quarter. Me frowns. Mom giving dirty looks. That's a quarter. Story 34. Male here. When I turned 8, my father told me that I was no longer allowed to watch cartoons because it was too childish and that's not what men watch. I was only allowed to watch them on Saturday mornings up until 12 o'clock p.m. Story 35. Growing up I had a trampoline that my absentee father bought. My mother was so worried that friends of mine would jump off and break their legs. She made them sign little legal waivers stating they wouldn't sue us. We had a stack of a dozen or so little half sheets of paper, each with a friend's crayon-scrawled printed name. Story 36. Actually the most brilliant thing my parents taught me was to not use the word stupid. And all the sorts was okay, but being dismissive to another human being was my parents' pet peeves. I'm a better human being for it. Story 37. My mom was a helicopter parent before it was cool. I couldn't be home alone or go for a walk out of earshot in our very safe rural neighborhood until I was 12. A trip to the mall with a friend was a battle at 16, and she only let my dad teach me to drive at 19. To this day, she asks what I want in restaurants, and if I tell her, she'll be like, and my daughter wants, okay mom, I had trouble speaking to strangers when I was in single digits. The fact that you led me to believe at least half of them were pedophiles may or may not have contributed to this. I'm 32 now, stop it. When we played wiffle ball, if we hit one into the vegetable garden in right field, it was an automatic out. Story 38. The only dumb rule I can think of was no socks. Either you had socks and shoes on or bare feet. I have no idea why this was my dad's huge pet peeve, but he would be so pissed, and of course my mother would enforce it equally harsh because she didn't want dad upset. Story 39. No video games on school days. Because my parents thought I wouldn't do homework, I kept straight as in BS. Doing homework and watching TV for the rest of the day. Seems legit. Story 40. Don't play with the light switches because it costs 10 cents to turn it on each time. When they'd me off I'd go in the bathroom and flick that like 1,000 times. Take that. Story 41. Honestly, I think the contradiction of always have safe, always be comfortable and don't have under my roof. Well gee thanks, my stepdad flipped out when I dyed my hair blue. Me, you said I could do whatever I want with my hair. Him, I did, but this is different. You knew what I meant, sigh. Apparently I didn't. Story 42. No internet after 11:30. My parents know a bit about computers and configured the router to block all access to the internet after 11:30 to get us to bed early. Didn't work, we stayed up till usually 2 anyway. We still have that rule and it's more annoying than ever, especially when playing chatting with friends online, especially with my girlfriend. They're really strict about it too. I mean, I'm 20, why am I putting up with this? At least I got them to agree to allow my laptop through at least for school, but it's still an inconvenience. I didn't go out much, so I lived a pretty sheltered existence until recently. Story 43. Some of you have parents that cared. My parents' rule was don't come home until sundown. My friend's dad doesn't let him play video games on any platform, not even his phone, after 10, he's 18. Story 44. 5 meetings a week at the Kingdom Hall, and no dating that. My mother grounded me once for breaking curfew. I was late because she called me and told me to pick her up, because she was shit-faced at the bar and couldn't drive. Story 45. My grandfather had a rule that my dad wasn't allowed to fight or run from the cops. He just had to go along quietly whenever they showed up. My dad was a hellion. Later on, a brawler, of course. He never acquired an actual criminal record, so maybe it wasn't such a dumb rule. Story 46. You have to eat every single last thing on your plate. 1. My mother was a shitty cook. She should have been summoned to The Hague to stand trial for the she wanted us to eat too. Thanks for the eating disorder. Story 47. I had to take an afternoon nap right after lunch before going outside to play. Damn it, that was the time all the kids went out to play and here I was being forced to sleep. It was treacherous then, but now I completely see now why they wanted me to sleep in the afternoon. I wish I could do that now, but then I have work and never get enough sleep anymore. YETT. Story 48. I know this sounds silly, but I was required to brush my teeth first thing every morning. I kept trying to get my mom to let me wait and brush my teeth until after breakfast, but no, teeth brushing had to be first. Story 49. My mother was convinced that masturbation was a sin. If she caught me, she would just walk into my room without knocking. She would freak out and tell me I was going to. Story 50. I was not allowed to watch the Care Bears. My mom's explanation at the time was that she felt the character of No Heart was far too dark for a children's show. Her explanation now the show annoyed the out of her. Story 51 Let's see was not allowed in any school yearbook until my senior year of high school. Couldn't have friends over or go to friends' houses if my mom hadn't personally met, and like the kid couldn't fetch the mail on my own until junior year of high school. Wasn't allowed in my own basement until junior year of high school. Wasn't allowed a Facebook until I sneakily got one on my own and then hid it from my parents for a month. Was punished if I didn't greet my father with a good morning every morning. Was not allowed a personal computer in my room until junior year of high school. Didn't cross the street on my own till I started driving a car. So senior year of high school not allowed to decorate my room walls. My dad gets really about having things be clean and organized everywhere in the house except his part and would take away my electronics if I didn't clean when he would tell me to. I wasn't allowed to hang out with just guys in high school. Middle school was fine, but high school and it was oh no too dangerous to justify a lot of these rules. My mom would put on the news every night and would focus on the girls my age who would be found murdered if I ever tried to question any rule. They would answer with just because, which is the worst answer. Never went shopping on my own for anything until college. Told my parents that I want a job where I can build things with my hands. Told me I couldn't do that because only dumb people do that. And they go to trade school if I brought home anything less than a B for any type of grade, quiz, test, semester. My dad would give that to me as a label. C girl. D girl. Wasn't allowed to shave my legs until high school cause my younger sister was having eczema issues and was allowed to shave hers. No pain meds for my period until high school. Not allowed to bike outside of my driveway without supervision until college. There's more, but like, I'm tired, man. Story 52 No friends or girlfriends over unless we're downstairs where parents can see. I had to be home by 7, otherwise my mother would have a full-on mental breakdown and start thinking I'd been murdered. I wasn't allowed to go to parties. I wasn't allowed to go into town with my friends. I could sleep over or go on school trips in case something happened. If I was ever late, she'd call the police. Any free time I had, they would take me swimming. As I've gotten older, part of me suspects this was done on purpose to keep me away from social events. My younger brother, though, could do whatever he wanted. I still resent my parents for how they raised me. I feel like I missed out on huge amounts of social interactions when I was growing up. Story 53 The unwritten rule was that I wasn't allowed to have any friends over. My mother made sure that anyone who came over got basically hounded and stalked until they left. She always wanted to know what I was doing or saying. So not only was I embarrassed, but the friend wouldn't want to come back or sometimes wouldn't want to be my friend anymore. And then she wonders why I only made friends on the internet and stayed in my room all the time. Story 54 No Calvin and Hobbes books. My dad gave me a ton of them because my mom saw one of those unlicensed decals of Calvin on something. From that, she deemed them filth and declared them contraband without ever opening one. And afterwards, anything stupid or weird I did, like most little boys are known for, was attributed to the influence of that evil pisser Calvin. Story 55 Wasn't allowed to have my own clothes. Was only allowed to wear old clothes after my mother. She said it's BC, I have to stay ugly otherwise someone will kidnap me on my way from school. Luckily in my country it is legal to work once you turn 15, so it's like someone else's life to me now. Story 56 I wasn't allowed to watch Hannah Montana or Wizards of Waverly Place. The logic was that Hannah Montana and the Wizards got into trouble, then got out of it using either their fame or magic. I didn't have those tools, so it was obviously a bad influence on me. Story 57 No spaghetti strap tank tops. No shorts shorter than gym shorts 2 sizes too big for girls. No secular music. No movie theaters. No makeup or hair dye. Girls must wear a bra at all times, even just around the house, because you're teasing the men and boys in the house if you don't. List goes on for days. Story 58 Basically, don't have an opinion. I could set a toe out of line without getting grounded. It was the butt of jokes from my friends, especially since I wasn't a bad kid to begin with. Story 59 My mother, attempting to instill nonviolence, I guess, decided words like gun and war were bad words. I once got in big trouble for drawing a detailed picture of a knight holding a sword which I worked on for an hour, and the only way I was able to calm her down was by convincing her that he only fought in tournaments. The last straw was one day, after a long day in grade 3, my best friend was over and we playfully used the terms shoddy and shotgun to call dibs on chairs, cookies, pieces of Lego, etc. She kept telling us to stop, that we were swearing, but we still said it under our breaths. As soon as he left, she slammed the door behind him and went off screaming, "Throw away Joe 1997. I told you to stop talking about guns," and it was like in that moment, she realized how stupid the whole thing was. We never spoke of that ridiculous rule again. Story 60 My sister lived with my mom and I lived with my dad. She had a 45 average in high school and left the house at free will. I failed one class and was grounded until the next report card. I lost motivation to pass my classes because I got comfortable staying home. Fast forward 10 years and my sister has a great social life with more than enough friends and is always on the town. I stay home every night and have a handful of friends and get drunk and play video games on the weekends. Story 61 I got in trouble for reading during class. I wasn't reading school material Wheel of Time and got written up for ignoring lessons. Get home, teacher called, spoke with my father, and my dad in his infinite wisdom disallowed me from reading altogether. In rebellious, I read off and you, Dad, don't turn on the lights in the car while we were driving or the police would arrest us. Story 62 In 4th grade when it was time to pick a musical instrument to play I wanted to learn the drums. Pop said no because any idiot can beat on some drums. He made me play the saxophone. My little had to lug that giant case a mile to and from school every day because my dad obviously had never seen a drummer play. Story 63. We were not allowed to graduate early. I'm serious, we all wanted to, had all the credits, but wasted a whole semester attending classes that served no purpose. I wasn't allowed to because my older sibling wasn't allowed to. There was no reasonable explanation as to why my older sibling wasn't allowed to, as she had already taken calculus at the college first semester senior year. Then my younger sibling wasn't allowed to because we weren't allowed to. Also, I wasn't allowed to hang out with my only friend in high school. My sister got an argument altercation with her and told my parents some story that made no logical sense and they believed her. I had to make up a new friend's name backstory so I could hang out with my only actual friend. I wasn't ever allowed to spend the night at her house either. We were friends for a few years. No reason, other than my mom thought I'd drink or something. My curfew was also at midnight. Why midnight? Because it's before the bars close at 1 a.m. If she'd just allow me to spend the night at my friend's house, I wouldn't even have to be driving at night period.